Hi everyone, welcome back. So in this video, we'll look at Azure RBAC, which is Role-based Access Control. So we will have a quick demo to understand what is RBAC and how you can control the access to various Azure resources in your subscription. Let's move on. What is Azure RBAC in a nutshell? It is a system that provides you a fine-grained access management of Azure resources. So using RBAC rules, you can segregate duties within your team and grant only the amount of access that is required for the users to perform their jobs. And I'll make sure to provide the link for the official Microsoft documentation in the description so that you can go through the documentation in detail if you want to. Let's move on. So how the RBAC works in a nutshell. So the way you control the access to resources using the RBAC is to assign the role itself. So you need to make a role assignment, and what are all the elements that are involved in assigning any particular role to users or groups or managed identities and so on. So this is one of the key concepts that you need to understand. And a role assignment consists of three elements to it. So one, the security principal. It could be a user, it could be a group, or it could be a managed identity, or it could be a service principal. So and also the role definition itself. So the list of actions that user can perform on any particular resource. So it will come to that in detail. And also the scope, but at which scope, if you want to set it at the subscription level, that applies, that inherits to all the resource groups and resources inside the subscription, or you can enforce the role assignment at the resource group level or even to a specific resource itself. Let's move on to a diagram that I wanted to show you guys to understand these three elements that we are talking about. And that is one of the key concepts. As I mentioned, we need to understand that's how the permissions are enforced. So out of the three key elements that we talked about, so the number one is the security principal, which is an object that actually represents user or group or service principal or managed identity that is requesting access to the Azure resources. So you can assign role to any of these security principal. So you can assign the role at the user level or to a group or to a managed identity or to a service principal itself. And then let's talk about role definition element. What is a role definition here? Role definition is nothing but a collection of permissions. It defines the list of actions that needs to be performed on the Azure resource itself. So you can see there are some example roles that we have here. There are many built-in roles that Microsoft is already providing for you to choose from, but you're also free to create your own custom role as well if that doesn't fit your the organizational needs. So you're free to create your custom role as well. And if you look at the snapshot, so we have roles at the high level as well, something like the owner role, contributor role, reader role, and we also have specific roles to the resources like virtual machine contributor, storage blob data reader, storage blob data contributors. Those kind of resource specific roles are also available for you to choose from and provide the fine-grained access control to the resources. So if you can see the snapshot here for the contributor role, essentially you are seeing a JSON here, which gives you the actions, not actions, data actions and not data actions and assignable scopes. So actions, the star implies when you have a contributor role to the resource, any of the resource, so you can manage all of the operations that resource. But the not actions, you can see some of the resource providers like authorization, delete, right? So which means like you cannot provide RBAC role to the resource itself. You can't control the Azure RBAC roles, but you can manage all the operations in that resource. So when you have a contributor role, let's quickly jump on to the Azure portal to look at some of the built-in roles that Microsoft is already providing. And also I will take you through the Microsoft official documentation for the built-in roles, wherein you can go through and identify if the roles are relevant for you to assign to any of the security principle, or if that doesn't meet your organizational needs, then you can go ahead and create a custom role as well. But the custom role is not in the scope of this video. We will probably talk about that in a later point in time. I'll create a separate video for the custom roles. That is not in the scope at the moment. So if we move back to Azure portal, so you can choose any resource that you have in the subscription. Maybe you can choose Demo VM. And the left blade, you can see Access Control IAM. You have to click on that, and you can see Check Access tab, Role Assignments tab, Roles tab. So click on Roles. There you can see all the built-in roles provided by Microsoft. Like as we talked about, the owner role, contributor role, reader role at the high level. Okay, and you can see the category as well. You can even filter based on the category. So whether it's in general category or compute or storage, you can filter the roles as well. And if I can jump over to the official Microsoft documentation for the built-in roles, I'll make sure to share this link as well in the description, so that you can go through the list of already available built-in roles provided by Microsoft. So you can see it's a huge list out here, and you can see the contributor role that we just discussed grants full access to manage all the resources, but it does not allow you to assign roles in Azure RBAC or manage any assignments in blueprints or share image cabinets. And if you wanted to look at the details of any particular built-in role, you can do so by just click on the specific role. Here, the contributor role. You can see the list of actions that that any user can perform with this role. You can see the actions. It's star, which denotes they can create and manage resources of all types. Okay, if the scope is at the subscription level, they can create n number of resource groups and resources of all types. And if the scope is restricted to any specific resource, they can control or they can contribute only to that specific resource. So it's about the scope itself. Also, we need to consider. So let's look at the role definition for one of the built-in role. Let's say the contributor role, which is in general category. So let me click on view. So it takes you to a page where you can see the list of actions that user can do with this contributor role, and the JSON you can have a look at it, and any assignments that are already there, you can have a look. So actions, you can see here the list of actions that user can perform with this contributor role, but the data actions are not applicable for this role. So maybe I can show you some of the storage account specific built-in roles, and we might have some data actions listed there, but data actions are not applicable for the contributor role in general, right? Those actions are specific to storage account. Okay, so maybe I can show you that quickly to get a sense of what those data actions are and how we can differentiate the actions and the data actions there, right? Yeah, but for the JSON for this contributor role, if I can move on, you can have a look under the permissions section. the actions star implies that it grants full access to manage all the resources. But under the not actions, you can see there is a provider, resource provider, Microsoft authorization /* delete and write, which means it does not allow you to control the assignment, role assignment in RBAC for this resource. Okay, so that's what it means. And there are other providers as well, like Blueprint and Compute, which we're not going to get into detail in this video. Okay, so data actions and not data actions, as I said, it's not applicable for this role. But let me just quickly move on to any storage account that I may have in my subscription. Let's get into the demo storage account. On the left blade, let me click on access control and let me click on roles. And here, let me try and filter any storage specific role, built-in role that we may have. So here you can see there are storage specific roles, built-in roles that are available in storage category. So let's look at probably the role which is storage blob data contributor, right? So it allows for read, write and delete access to Azure blobs, okay, in the container. So let me click on view just to have a quick look at the role definition. So here you can see the list of actions under permissions tab, what user can do with this role in the storage account, and what are all the data actions. So here you can see there are some set of actions that user can perform under Microsoft.storage resource provider, right? So they can read, write and delete the blobs at the container level. So if I can move on to JSON tab, let's have a quick look at the actions and data actions. So under the actions, you can see in this resource provider under the storage accounts, so user will have permissions to delete the container, read the container and also write to the container. So okay, and if you look at the data specific actions here under data actions, you can see under the blob container, user can control the blobs, right? So they can delete, read, write, they can move the blobs, okay, they can add the blobs. So these are data specific actions that any user with this role can perform. They can contribute to the storage account. Okay, so just keep in mind the data actions are applicable to storage accounts or storage specific resources. Okay, so for virtual machine and all, there are specific roles to virtual machine, like virtual machine contributor. So just keep in mind that you can look at this role definition for any of the role that you are interested in or relevant for you to provide to the users in your organization or groups in your organization. Just have a look at the permission section, the actions and not data actions, data actions. So what are the list of actions that user can perform, and provide only the required level of access to the users. And that is very important to limit the access and probably enable them to perform their jobs and provide only the required access that is needed, right? So that is one of the key concepts in Azure. So, and also the scope also matters here. So as I mentioned already, so if you want to limit the access to any specific resource, you can control the access at the resource level, okay, instead of providing the role assignment at the subscription level or at the resource group level, right? Instead of, for example, let's say if you want to provide the access to only the storage account, so then you can limit the access only to the storage account. So you don't want to define the scope at the subscription level or resource group level. That doesn't make sense. If you provide at the subscription level or resource group level, the access will be inherited to all the resources in the resource group, and you don't want to do that. So whatever access that is required for the user to perform their jobs. We have to carefully assess that and then provide the fine-grained access to the users. Okay, let's have a quick demo. We'll look at a scenario where we will try and provide a reader role to one of the user at the subscription level, and see how the permissions are restricted for that user in the subscription. And also we will try and see if we can restrict the access to one specific storage account for that user and provide the required access, and see how the role is taking effect for that user. So here I am in Azure portal. So let me move on to my subscription and access control, role assignments. So I have a user which is, let me search, SM Azure Academy. I have this user. As you can see, I have already provided reader role for this user at the subscription level itself. Okay, so that is the difference. As I mentioned, you can control the access, and the scope also needs to be defined when you create a role. So just probably just to show you, if you try and add any role assignment for the users or groups or managed identities, as we discussed, to any security principal. So let's say if you want to provide at the subscription level, so you can click on add role assignment, and you can see there are three different sections are there. One, you need to choose the role, any built-in role that is relevant for this assignment. Then you need to choose the security principal, then you have to assign. Okay, three different steps. And let's say if I wanted to provide the reader role, which we already have, but just for the sake of demo, I just wanted to take you through these steps so that you get a familiarity of how you can create the role assignment at different scopes, right? Let's say reader role. I'm choosing reader role, click on next. So under the members section, you can see the selected role as reader, which we have already chosen in the first step. Assign access to, whether we want to provide to users or groups or service principal or managed identity. So this is where you are going to assign it to a managed identity or a user or group. So you have to choose that. So under the members, let me click on select members, and you can search the user and select the user. Select. Yeah, now the user is selected and we know which role we are going to provide. And if you click on next, yeah, so here under review and assign, you can see the role that we have chosen. What is the scope? The scope is at the subscription level itself, right? So we are not restricting the access to any specific resource group or resource in the subscription. So here the scope is at the subscription level. That means the reader role will be inherited for the user for all the resource groups and resources inside the subscription. Okay, and that's the reason I'm just stressing this. This is very key to understand. So you have to limit the access that is actually required for the users. So let's say if you want to provide the reader role for this user SM Azure Academy at the storage account level only, right? So you don't want the user to access look at any of the other resources or resource groups inside the subscription. Then there is no point of defining the scope at the subscription level. You have to provide the role assignment at the resource scope itself. Okay, so that is very key to understand. So you have to assess and then provide the role to the users and decide at which scope you need to limit the access. Okay, that is very important to for you to understand. Okay, So that's about it. So then you can go ahead and review and assign, um, and the role will take effect. And one more important thing to understand here is, for the role to take effect, it won't be immediate. It might take a couple of minutes for the role to take effect. You have to refresh the portal, or you may also need to sometimes log out and sign back in for the role to take effect for the user. Okay, so let me close this. So we already have the reader role at the subscription level, subscription scope for this user. So I have another window open. So I've logged into Azure portal with the user that we have just seen, or we have provided the role assignment, which is SM Academy. Okay, the SM Academy user. So if I get into the subscriptions, so you can see this user have reader role that we have provided at the subscription scope already. So you can this user can look at all of the resources in the subscription. Okay, so a couple of things. So this account which I logged on is my subscription account, so that I can quickly show you. So I'm the account admin, so you can see the role account admin here. Okay, for my personal subscription, and I have logged on to the portal in another window with the user SM Academy at the domain, my domain. Okay, sheikh.mohammed.n. So as we can see, yeah, we have the reader role for this user at the subscription scope. The user can look at all of the resource groups that are there in the subscription. Okay, so if I can move on to resources, the user can see all of the resources that are there in the subscription. Okay, but they can't delete it. So just in case, if you are trying to delete any of the resources, let us quickly try that. So I cannot delete any of the resources. So as this user have only the reader role at the subscription scope, so they can look at the resources, they can read the resources, but they can't delete or write to any of the resource groups or resources, right? Okay. So let's go back to the other window, and let's remove the role for this user at the subscription scope. We go to role assignments. I'm just going to remove the reader role for this user, SM Azure Academy. Okay, let me say remove. I'm just removing this role assignment at the subscription scope. It's done. Okay, let's look at another scenario wherein we can try and restrict the access only to this storage account for the test user that we are looking at, right? So let's move on to access control, role assignments, and try and add a role assignment. Okay, let's try and provide probably the contributor role. Okay, so let me try and select the contributor role. Okay, so I wanted to limit the access only to the storage account, my data lake gen2 store, and I'm just providing the contributor role for the SM Azure Academy user, so that they can control all of the containers and blobs inside the storage account, but that does not allow the user to assign any RBAC role. Okay, so we can just quickly look at that. I'm just choosing contributor role, click on next, select the members, some Azure Academy, select, click on next. So here you can see the scope is at the resource itself, which in this case is the storage account, My Data Lake Gen2 Store. So go ahead and review assign. We're adding a contributor role for this user to only the storage account. Okay. So you can see here a contributor role has been assigned to this user at the resource scope here. Okay, let me move on to another window where we have already logged on with the test user. Let me refresh, probably for the role to take effect. Let me get into storage accounts. Let me filter only the subscription that is required. Okay, we are not able to see the storage account yet. Probably we will wait for a couple of minutes and come back. Okay, after a couple of minutes, I had to log in back to the portal with the test credentials, test user credentials, and let me filter only the required subscription to see if you're able to see the storage account. Yes, there it is. You can see the storage account now appearing for this test user. So let's get into the storage account, and you can look at the containers. So we have, as you can recall, we have provided the contributor role for this test user at the resource scope for the storage account. The users will be able to control this storage account. They can add to the container, they can delete the information, but they cannot assign any RBAC role or any of the security principle to this resource. So let me go back to the storage account. So let's move on to access control. So let's try and see if we can add a role assignment, because as you can recall, we have seen the JSON for this contributor built-in role. So there are not actions that we have seen. This role doesn't allow you to add any RBAC role to any of the users, right? So let's try and see if the system allows. Okay, so you can see here. So the role assignment addition is disabled. So user does not have permissions to go ahead and add a role assignment to this resource scope. Okay, so it doesn't allow you to do so. Okay, thank you very much for watching. So just to summarize, let me move on to the diagram that we have just looked at. So Azure RBAC is one of the key concepts in Azure. So it is very important for you to understand what are all the elements involved to it to provide the fine-grained access control to the Azure resources. So we talked about security principle. It could be users, groups, or service principal, or managed identity. And we talked about the role definition and the built-in roles provided by Microsoft already. And we looked at the role definition in JSON format. What are all the list of actions, not actions, data actions or not data actions that a user can perform with the required permissions, with the required built-in roles. And if that doesn't fit your organizational needs, you can go ahead and create a custom role, which I will probably create one more video to demonstrate the custom role creation itself. Okay, and we talked about the scope, which is very key here to provide only the required access for the users to perform their jobs. So you have to decide at which scope you have to restrict the access, whether it's at the resource level or you wanted to provide the role assignment at the resource group level or subscription or to the management group to apply the role across all the resources inside the subscriptions, right? So it basically inherits, as we talked about, when you provide at the subscription level, it inherits the role to resource group and all of the resources inside it. So you have to assess and see what is actually required here, and then provide the fine-grained access to the users. And I hope this video helps you to understand Azure RBAC. And if you have any questions around this, please feel free to comment in this video. So I'll provide the required information in the description for you to go through the built-in roles and the Azure RBAC documentation itself. So I'm glad to help if there are any questions about RBAC. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Thank you.